Okay, thanks for coming. I wanted to tell you a little bit about applying the DALL-E large language model from OpenAI to kidney pathology. And as far as I am aware, we are the first people to do that. So like the image behind me was stimulated by a prompt that contains the words tubulitis and rejection. This image has a prompt for diffuse proliferative glomerulonephritis. And this one, membranous GN with spikes. Now the prompt says nothing about spike and dome, so the spike and dome features here, I think, have to have been something that was spontaneous on the part of DALL-E. Now, why are we interested in this? It has to do with artificial general intelligence, the idea of machines being smarter than human beings. And in May of this year, the predicted date of that decreased quite a bit from 2057 to 2039. Now, you might also think about how you would characterize the images I've been showing you here. And I think one word you could use is surreal. And this is what Leonard Cohen said about me when he and I met. So this is iconic Canadian poet, singer, songwriter Leonard Cohen. I visited him over a 3-day weekend in November 2005. And at that time, he gave me the book of Mercy, and wrote this in the front. For Kim, great artist of the surreal, thanks for all your help. And one of his insights was that he didn't really think that I realized that not only was I doing things that were surreal, but they were serially surreal. And Leonard Cohen and I talked about many things that weekend, but it would surprise you to learn that we talked about kidney pathology quite a bit. He was fascinated by the concept of borderline changes. And when I left, he wrote a lyric that became the song Treaty, which is the best song in his final album in 2016. And originally, the word borderline from the Banff Borderline Changes was in that lyric 5 times. But gradually, over the next 10 years, he took out 4 of the 5 borderlines and created the song Treaty, which has borderline only in the final stanza, the final line, but is quite persistent. So Leonard Cohen died in 2016. In 2017, the jazz ballet Montreal group started touring a show entitled Dance Me, the Songs of Leonard Cohen, that they have now performed these past 5 years, and every single time it ends with that final stanza of Treaty containing borderline. So what one can say about borderline changes is that eventually, and I hope we do, we will probably remove borderline from the Banff classification because our determinations will be precise enough that we won't need it anymore. But I'm pretty sure it's never going away from Leonard Cohen's music. And it is kind of a featured part of that music. Okay, so now I'm going to take you to the PowerPoint. Just before I do that, I'm going to be showing a lot of images like this, and you may like or not like this style. No art has been produced like this since 2006. This is the work of Philippe Hébert. And I sort of fell in love with this. I bought all his stuff and then commissioned him to do pieces of art specifically for me. But that was singular. That was unusual. Nobody else liked this art. Nobody with deep pockets liked it. So it didn't really sell. And you'd see what the characteristics are. When lines come to a meeting point, they go beyond that and create these spicules. And so every figure, every object has these protruding spicules, which gives it kind of a rebellious quality. And you can think about what you think about rebellious things. But anyway, that's what I think this represents. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so Dolly and kidney pathology machine fantasies give a hint about what artificial general intelligence will be like. So this is a graph of predictions about artificial general intelligence. And you will see that 2050 is here. And the prediction has hovered around 2050 for a very long time and gone up much higher than that, almost to 2100. But in May of this year, there's a sudden dip bringing us down to 2039. 2039 is only 17 years from now. And living in a world where machines are smarter than we are will really change everything. And so it's something we need to prepare for in some way. Yeah, so related to that then, on July 29th of this year, I became a beta user for DALL-E, the OpenAI large language model graphics program. And this then is a story of my journey with DALL-E these past 6 weeks and how it does with kidney pathology. And it's not a sad tale of machines completely replacing graphic artists and how you can put in a text prompt and obtain any image you want. No, it's almost exactly the opposite of that. Every prompt entry into DALL-E is a negotiation. You don't know the outcome. You put words in, but you don't really know what DALL-E is going to do. It is the best AI graphics program because it has many rules to prevent creation of offensive images. And I also think offensive attribution. In other words, it can't steal stuff and it can't produce things that are offensive. And those rules actually work pretty well. So you can imagine that there will come a time when DALL-E is able to produce high quality pathology images similar to the aerial images we routinely show in these nephropathology rounds, perhaps as soon as in DALL-E E3-4 or E3 or E4. And won't that be something? That's not exactly the situation that we're in now. The pictures that I've been producing are maybe more colorful and more beautiful than most kidney pathology, but they're not very similar to standard pathology images. So, but what I can tell you I've learned in these past 6 weeks using DALL-E is that nothing is impossible. And why is that? Well, DALL-E has access to the entire publicly available image and text content of the internet and has access to it. In other words, has the computer power to actually get hold of those images and text. And so it is as smart as the whole world in the sense of having access to all that content. So it's not surprising that if you keep working on it, anything you want DALL-E to depict, it can give you some hint. So let's take Alports. You put in Alports. First thing that happens is it marks it as a spelling error. But I learned a long time ago that that doesn't mean that it doesn't understand it or won't search for it. It's just not a common word. But then it eventually shows you something that looks like a multi-layered basement membrane. And so it kind of knows that that's what it should be looking for in Alports. And the same is true of every other kidney condition. Initially, it seems like DALL-E knows nothing, but as you keep probing, keep pursuing the issue, eventually you get something related to that pathologic condition. So we have been then integrating this to the other research that I'm doing. We're studying the big 24 challenges of humanity and how AI can help with those. And this is a picture of me and Ashita Mogi. And so she had done graphics for the first 12 of these. And we decided to let DALL-E do the graphics for the second 12. And so these are the graphics that she did. And if you just think about it, this is pretty standard. You have in your mind something that you want to draw. You have graphic artist skill, and you simply draw what's in your mind, right? Doing a text search in DALL-E is not at all like that, because DALL-E decides how to react to the words that you put in there. You can't tell it exactly what it is supposed to look like. So what are the consequences of that? They're twofold. First of all, what DALL-E produces and how DALL-E tries to change your behavior by threatening to kick you off the program if you keep asking for things that it regards as harmful content. Yeah, so let's look at this graphic, which DALL-E produced. It takes only 10 seconds for each set of 4 graphics to be produced. And it is an image that DALL-E thought represented unknown unknowns. You saw that unknown unknowns is the 24th challenge of the human race. So we needed a graphic for that, and this is it. I think it's pretty clever. It's probably as good as anything any of us could have thought of for unknown unknowns. But what about some of the other things? I originally had genetic degeneration. That was not a term that I had chosen, but it was a term somebody else had suggested should be as a part of the list. DALL-E refused to do a search. Instead, if I kept searching for genetic degeneration, it would kick me off the program. So I changed it to genetic engineering, and DALL-E's fine, and I'm fine. I mean, I've made a lot of accommodations like that, where I basically defer to DALL-E's rules. So I'm learning from this sentient machine, as presumably it is also learning from me. Now, this is our research team. We have a research team of 28. began as a team of 18, that this is the faculty part of that. And then we have 9 faculty members and 9 students. And then for the CIHR grant, which we are just submitting next week, we added 10 additional faculty. And you may wonder, like, what do these people have to do for me? I'll show you a picture of the students. Yeah, these are some of the students. You may recognize some of these people. Yeah, so do you think I'm going around to these 28 people and saying, what have you done for me lately? No, that's actually not how it works. I see my role as sort of stimulating them. And where do I get the stimulus from? I get the stimulus from basically these 5 people: Nell Watson, David Wood, the chair of London Futurists, Elon Musk, Yuval Noah Harari, and Peter Diamandis. I follow pretty closely what those 5 people are doing. I get a lot of new ideas from them every week, and I pass those ideas on to the rest of the team. So it's not very burdensome to be part of our research team, and this work on DALL-E is the main focus of what we're doing at the moment. Why are we so interested in artificial general intelligence? It has to do with Eliezer Yudkowsky and his pushing the idea of AGI ruin and a list of lethalities. He believes, and you better listen carefully to this, that we're all going to die soon because of misaligned artificial general intelligence, and nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody's worrying about it. And this is the way the human race will end. Whereas Rich Sutton in computing science and I believe the opposite, that the same arguments that he believes are going to end the human race, we think could lead to an AI utopia. That includes a medical AI utopia, and we would like to move toward that and to promote that idea rather than this idea that we'll all be dead soon because nobody's doing anything about the risk of AGI. This again is the curve of predicted artificial general intelligence. As I pointed out before, probably in May, you didn't notice anything, but there was a huge shift in the curve from 2057 to 2039. 2039 is only 17 years from now. I think the date will probably come down further, and probably AGI is only, let us say, 15 years away, which means that everyone's life will change quite a bit. Now, I showed you at the beginning those spicular images from Philippe Hébert, and some of you may not have liked that art. And if you don't like it, then you have something in common with the guy depicted here, who is a very powerful force in kidney medicine, who's been active probably your entire career. This is John Davis, who was the CEO of the National Kidney Foundation until 2011. And he now is the CEO of KDIGO. And all of you are influenced by KDIGO and their clinical practice guidelines. Even if you pretend not to be, you are influenced by them. And he is the chief guy. So he and I worked very closely together in the initial years of NKF cybernephrology. And he made a lot of decisions which have impacted me in kind of profound ways. First of all, he put our funding in the NKF budget as a line item, in other words, kind of guaranteeing it. And that funding was $400,000 US a year, which was a substantial amount of money. So when you think of the beginning of the Banff classification, a lot of the funding of the initial Banff meetings came from the National Kidney Foundation. Probably Banff would not have very easily occurred without that, because the fundraising would have been quite challenging without that help. And a funny thing happened to us. We were working together very closely. I told my friends that I was like the futurist for the National Kidney Foundation. And John Davis heard me saying this, and he took me aside. He said, "No, Kim, listen, the CEO should be the futurist." So it's true, I'm learning about futurism from you, but you're not the futurist, I am. If you do a good job teaching me, then that's how things will work. And I'll then have a good grasp of futurism. I'll be a better CEO that way. Yeah. But another decision that he made beside the line item was that I should have my role of heading NKF cybernephrology in perpetuity, that is forever. And that may seem like an unusual decision, but it really is what happened. So after 10 years of very generous funding, they decided they wanted cybernephrology to continue forever. They just couldn't fund it. And so I've been doing it with students rather than highly paid professionals since that time. But it's worked. All the things we were doing before, we're still doing now. And students are doing some very cool stuff as a consequence of the changed structure. But John Davis didn't like the Philippe Hebert art with the spicules. Why is that? That's because he was a leader in kidney medicine running very large organizations. It's easier to run a large organization if people conform, don't break the rules. And so what he felt was that art was encouraging people to diverge from the standard path. And so he didn't like that. It made him uncomfortable. And we discovered that my slides made him uncomfortable right before a very high profile meeting that we had with Microsoft. So NKF cybernephrology began in 1997. And in the 9th year, in 2006, we were hoping to create this partnership with Microsoft where we could expand and do a lot of cool things. He and I talked about that a lot, but we independently prepared slide sets. His slide set, which I didn't like very well, and my slide set, which he didn't like very well. So what happened? We went to the Microsoft meeting without slides then, because just a few minutes before we couldn't make new slides. He didn't like my slides, I didn't like his slides. So I just went there to talk with some pieces of paper and no slides. And this, of course, there aren't pictures of that, but DALL-E can make pictures of anything. And so these are DALL-E's pictures of what it thinks that early afternoon meeting in 2006 would have been like. And where did it get these colors? These are the Microsoft colors. It's somewhat similar to the Microsoft logo. So it's not a bad job. It's something that DALL-E has produced. Yeah. And so this is the second image. And so this is another image with the Microsoft colors. And what about John Davis today? I would say he's probably more influential today than he's ever been. You can see his appearance hasn't changed very much over the 25 years that I've known him. And he has raised over $200 million for programs in kidney disease and transplantation. He's done a lot of important things. I'm very grateful to him. And it's true, of course, that the partnership with Microsoft didn't come off, and it may be because we didn't have prepared slide sets. But still, that initial period of support and the confidence that they wanted me to keep doing what I'm doing forever was a very beneficial thing for me and for all the things that I do. Okay, so let's talk now about Philippe Hebert. And you may wonder why I want to record this presentation and what's the deal? You know, one of the reasons is to find Philippe, because I'm sure it will have that effect. He and I got on quite well the one time we met face to face in 2006. But let me tell you a little bit about the history before then. There used to be this website, rebelartists.com, was really cool for the artists. There was no middleman. They could set their own prices. They could sell art directly to the outside world. And it was just wonderful for independent artists. And of course, there were many large art companies, and they could not allow something like this to continue. So one of those large companies, Jupiter Images, bought rebelartist.com, no longer allowed individual artists to sell their stuff on it. And that was that. And there used to be this poignant message there: a new light on the dark lies that affect us all will soon be lit. But nothing ever changed, and rebelartist.com never came back. But in there, I encountered Philippe Hebert. I bought all his stuff on the site and asked him for more. I, commissioned more art produced in a similar way. I love the spicules. Some of you may know that the Banff Center for Conferences used to have conferences called Interactive Screen. And it was sort of their technology workshops, technology conferences over many years. And I attended that all during this period. And that audience liked Philippe Hebert's spicular art very, very much. But they weren't running very large organizations as John Davis was. Anyway, so when Philippe and I met in 2006, he came to see me on his bicycle when I was visiting Montreal and said, "Would you like to see what I'm doing now?" I was amazed. So the spicules were gone. He said they were gone forever. He was never going back to them. The art sold better without them. I was the only one buying the spicular art. And he had just made a kind of practical decision in his life as an artist to do the kind of art that would sell. And that seems a very practical decision to me. I'm sure he's done well since then, but I have not seen him or interacted with him since 2006. And I think as a consequence of this video, I probably will, because someone who knows him will watch the video and then, yeah, so let me show you some of the art. The spicules apply to everything, so that not just like human beings, but to also inanimate objects. And every time that lines cross, they don't stop there, they go beyond. So every line crossing becomes one of these spicules. So this shows a third arm. So it's got two arms holding briefcases, third arm carrying some sort of electronic billboard. And this shows computer, sentient machine, offering you a cup of coffee. Now, one of the important things to realize is that the current version of DALL-E has limits and flaws, but they will be very quickly fixed. The interval between DALL-E and DALL-E 2 was, I think, less than a year. And I'm sure there will be a DALL-E 3 and a DALL-E 4. So every flaw I'm going to point out to you now will be fixed probably within the next year or year and a half. So if you look at this image, there's a sequence, right? The computer is offering coffee to the human being. And if you then put that image into DALL-E and ask for variants on it, every single variant assumes that the person with the coffee is the human being, and that the computer is not doing anything related to the coffee. So here are all those pictures, and you can see there's not a single one where the computer is offering the coffee to the person. And that other image with the third arm comes out from the chest, and none of these images really show the third arm. They're showing a more conventional human with two arms. One of them shows a sort of human-sized mouse. But anyway, so there are a lot of obvious things like that. The concept of the third arm and the concept of a computer offering coffee to a human that DALL-E does not get and probably wouldn't get in the current version. But I'm sure it will in the version after that. These are some of the other images. This is sort of medicine of the future and shows a robot nurse who's elevated above the floor and just sort of sits there in thin air. And that's telemedicine connection to a remote physician and the patient. And you notice they all have spicules. The nurse has spicules. The doctor on the telemedicine link has spicules, and the patient has spicules. And part of the idea is that one eye comes off the surface of the face and it's just hanging there. And you can see that that's a feature of all three. Yeah. So one of the things I asked him to depict was multitasking. And this was his picture commissioned by me, where the person is doing computing using both hands and feet. Let's see how DALL-E does with that. And so DALL-E gets really confused about how many hands and feet a person is supposed to have. But you'd say, well, what about the spicules? Yeah, there always are spicules, but they're nothing like Philippe Hebert's spicules. This is a spiky thing coming off of the hair. There are other, just a second. Hello? Yes? Yeah? Good, I'm in a Zoom and people are watching me talk to you, but I thought it might be important. What's up? In 1 hour. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So, yeah, so you can see that it does not do a very good job of but I think one other thing, if you think about this from Philippe's point of view, you could think that if I was a more evil guy than I am, what I really would have been searching is a way to get DALL-E to make many more images like Philippe used to produce without Philippe's participation and with this exactly the same kind of spicules. And you can see consistently that that's not possible, that DALL-E does not produce identical art. When you put in Philippe's art, you get DALL-E's art back, and it doesn't have the same features. So I can't steal Philippe's persona, his soul, whatever you say. I cannot make DALL-E be an artificial Philippe Hebert and make art that he doesn't want to make anymore. And that's very good for all of us. I mean, the same question would be whether Soroush, whether his presentation style, whether DALL-E could, create graphics better than what Soroush can, and present clinical cases, and the same with collage and so on, right? And I think uniformly the answer is no, that the system is not set up so you can duplicate exactly individual human performance. And you wouldn't want that. And it does not do that. Here are just some other images. Now, this one, I won't show you the DALL-E version, but you can see this is a wristwatch wristwatch treadmill, and doing the treadmill while computing. So there are three ideas in it: wristwatch, treadmill, and computing. No matter how many times you try, you cannot get DALL-E to reproduce the wristwatch part of this. I think it somehow doesn't fit with the other two. It can get the treadmill, and using a computer on a treadmill does fine with that, but it cannot ever make this into a wristwatch. Okay, so I at least at the time in 2006, I felt saddened that Philippe was no longer going to be producing any of this art again. And if any of you would like to, the next time you draw something, when you come to the meeting point of two lines, go beyond the lines and create some spicules like Philippe used to do. Viva las spicules. Okay, so let's talk then. This is sort of a transition then of what might we hope for, what benefits to kidney pathology could come from using DALL-E. And so I think one thing you can think about is that there might be insights into the future of kidney pathology or what it could eventually do. Let's look at some of the insights that have come already. So you may know that, like, for a very large number of years, since 1988, I've been interested in the challenge of human cooperation. And so this is about the prompt here is improving ways of cooperating for humans emerging from machine learning large language models. And what this shows is two human figures, but with kind of a metallic sheen, right? It's as if humans and machines combined, and the humans now, their faces have a metallic sheen. And you know about patina. Patina, something many art aficionados consider very beautiful, which is the green pigment that copper producing surfaces get over time from oxidation of the copper. And that's what this is showing then. So these are presumably beings that are sort of a combination of human and machine, and they're developing this, patina as a consequence of that. Yeah. So then you might think about this general idea of artificial general intelligence utopia with improved human cooperation, truthfulness, and flourishing. And how are we going to get there? So I put in this prompt, and it seems like the machine was sort of confused. First of all, I did something which I now know isn't allowed, which is to put your own name in the prompt. You can't put your own name in the prompt, but I did that. And so rather than showing a picture of me, it shows a picture of Vincent van Gogh. He's holding some sort of torch, but also there are all these other objects that cannot be readily identified. And I think that is an encouragement to us to try to figure out what the other elements are in making this AGI utopia a success. Yeah. So now let me show you about really what happens with kidney pathology images. You're all familiar with what linear GBM staining would look like. You've seen it many times, you've thought about it many times. This is what happens when you take a fluorescence picture and you input it into DALL-E for variance. And you can see there's nothing linear here, right? It isn't a true variant on linear staining, but it's kind of encouraging that it seems to have at least the idea of glomeruli. I think that's encouraging that exists, and also the idea of tubules. It seems to lack vessels as far as I can tell, but I might be wrong about that. But you can see how primitive this is and how it probably wouldn't be possible using DALL-E 2 to get it to create true linear staining. Maybe that will be possible in DALL-E 3 or 4. Okay, and one of the other challenges then is getting it to be able to depict cells and nuclei. But more and more I am getting it to do that. And this has, I think, many problems, as does this. If you're thinking of these as specific cell types, I mean, if these are lymphocytes, they've got too much cytoplasm. If they're monocytes, they're not quite right either. But it probably is attempting to show inflammatory cells. And similarly here, this is diffuse proliferative GN that has inflammatory cells, bone marrow derived cells as a part of the cell mix. Then this is membranous GN with spikes. And what's cool about this is you not only got spikes, very obvious ones, you wouldn't have trouble recognizing these spikes, but it also does spike and dome. I think this is something it could only get from other pictures of membranous GN with spikes. So it's used the content of the internet, come up with this structure, which is kind of spike and dome. This is crescentic and necrotizing glomerulonephritis. And this also is, I imagine this could be fibrin deposits, much more colorful than real fibrin, but still encouraging. Yeah. And this is diffuse proliferative GN again. This is rejection with intimal arteritis. It has the idea of some sort of tubular structure. It's done quite a lot. I mean, it's attempting to recreate vessels, but it's really not succeeding in creating anything that's like an artery. But you might think, that this, if you modified it a bit, this maybe could be an artery. Yeah, and this is diffuse proliferative GN. You're probably wondering what the last slide is going to be, eh? Yeah, and this is Felipe Bear's original thank you slide for the end of the presentation that we were going to give at Microsoft, but never did. So I hope you like it. Not very many people have seen this slide before because of the strange fact that the two people going to that Microsoft meeting had incompatible artistic tastes, and so we didn't use the slide set. But I think really there's a lot of good news here that it is possible to learn from DALL-E. It is giving us a little bit of a benign taste of what artificial general intelligence will be like, how much help machines will provide us. And yeah, and that a lot of the scary things you could think of DALL-E being willing to produce any image that you ask for, right? That is not possible. It will not produce any image that you ask for. Every text prompt is a negotiation, and it then decides what is safe, what is within its programming to do based on the text that you have entered. And it is in kind of command of the situation, in that these beta user spots for DALL-E are very much in demand. And if you search for inflammatory things, DALL-E will kick you off the program and not let you back. So the human has a lot to lose if you offend this sentient machine. I think that's kind of an interesting part of this. So let me unshare, and yeah, we can. Do you have any questions? It's not the usual subject matter.
So does DALL-E get this whole thing from internet and somewhere, or somebody feeds this?
No, it's entirely from the internet, but it's the entire internet. In other words, it's the entire publicly accessible internet. So you and I wouldn't have anywhere near, the ability in a lifetime to look at all of that, but it can do it pretty quickly. So only large companies can afford to do these large language models. So for instance, nobody here at the U of A is creating things like this. You have to be an entity the size of, say, Apple or Microsoft, Google, or a national government, let us say, in order to do this, to create this sort of thing. And one of the reasons why there's so few beta users is that it's actually quite resource intensive. It takes a lot of computer power to do each search. So even though it only takes 10 seconds, it's not using my computer, it's using a huge computer resource of these large companies. And so that is why there's so few allowed users. So two other kidney pathologists who are now using it, but they've only had it for less than a week now.
So do you have to apply to be able
to? Yes. And what do they look for?
Yeah.
They look at your Instagram channel, and their standards are quite high for what that Instagram channel has to look like. And so you may wonder why I even have an Instagram channel. This is the reason that I realized that for things like this, I had to do that. And singer Mallory Chipman runs my channel. So it's a very well-maintained and youthful channel because it's run by a 26-year-old singer. And if you direct message me there, you don't get me, you get Mallory, and she answers. Occasionally, somebody actually asks something that only I would know, and then she passes it on to me. But most simple questions she answers. And yeah, so that's the reason that I did that, so I could be like the first kidney pathologist using DALL-E. Yeah.
Next time I go to Mallory's concert, I'll ask her.
Yeah. So another thing that I think I said after you came in has to do with borderline changes and Leonard Cohen. So when I met with him, he and I talked about Banff borderline changes for a long time. I was amazed that he would be that interested in it. And he thought it relates to the human condition very accurately. Like there are lots of problems humans have that are very much like this inability to decide whether you have rejection or not, and being in an in-between state, indeterminate state. So he found that very, if you will, poetic or lyrical or whatever you want to say. Right. So what that means, I can confidently tell you, we may, and I hope we do, eventually remove borderline changes from the Banff classification, but it will never be removed from Leonard Cohen's music. And it has great prominence there in that the touring company from Montreal Jazz Ballet, I think that you went to their show, right? So
yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It was very nice.
Yeah. So the very last part of it was not the entire Song of Treaty, but just the last stanza. And the last stanza of Treaty is the way the program always ends, and it has the word borderline in it. And that is the influence of my visit to Leonard Cohen from November 2005. Yeah, so I wanted you to know that. Yeah, and that was the only page of his notebook at his memorial service in 2017, a year after he died. There was this huge program, and it had many things, it had pictures and history and so on, but only 2 pages from his notebook. And those pages showed the first draft of treaty that he wrote right after I left, containing the 5 borderlines and the way in which that was then crafted and modified over the next 10 years. Yeah.
Cool.
Sarush, any
Thanks, Kim. No, that was great.
questions?
Thank you very much.
Great.
Have a great weekend.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much.